Youth and governance, are we all at the table? Well, a very good morning and welcome to you. I am Kemuel A, Pascall, your moderator for this morning's discussion, being aired live right here on the Parliament channel, on ParlView on YouTube, and also via Parliament Radio 105.5 FM. I'd like to thank you for joining us this morning. Well, this morning's discussion forms part of the Office of the Parliament's continued effort in celebration and commemoration of Commonwealth Day 2023. And I should also let you know that this year, 2023, has been declared at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in 2022 as the Year of the Youth. And it's a year dedicated to youth-led action and all things relating to youth. And of course, this morning's discussion, we have 7 panelists that are joining us for this morning. And so before we get into the discussion, allow me to introduce my panelists. Joining us via Zoom, we have Dr. Henry Charles. He's a youth development specialist. To my right, we have Dr. Mohammed. He is a geopolitical analyst. To his right, we have Ms. Jásher De Gannes. She is a radio host and also a former youth premier of the Tobago House of Assembly, Youth Assembly. And to her right, we have Ms. Terriann Baker. She is the Vice President of the Trinidad Youth Council. To my left, I have Ms. Chrisette Benjamin. She's a youth activist and leader of the I Believe in Success Foundation. And to her left, you have Ms. Samantha Rampersad. She is the second Vice President of the Trinidad Youth Council. And to her left, we have Mr. Khaleem Ali. He is a youth peace and security consultant. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Good morning. Governance, the good, the bad, and the ugly. When you think of governance, what do you think of? Ms. Baker, let's start off with you.
Okay, so when I think of governance, I think of a system by which institutions operate. And of course, when we delve deeper into discussion, we'll go into all of the layers that encompasses. But essentially, it's the processes that an entity follows, or entities.
Mr. Ali, could you join the discussion now?
Well, I agree with what Terriann has to say. I think if I would build on that, it's the management of all the different spheres that make an organization or a state what it is. So whether it be social, political, economic, it's multifaceted, and it requires a concerted effort and a holistic effort to ensure that governance actually occurs.
Dr. Charles, I'd like to bring you into the discussion now. What does governance mean to you?
When I think governance, issues of justice, equity, these are the first that come to mind. Issues of intersectionality, and of course inclusion.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Charles. Chrisette, I'd like to bring you into the discussion now. What does governance mean to you?
So governance to me means transformational leadership, but also it's the process of, society. You have so many needs but limited resources, and it's making that conscious decision and effort. How are you going to use these resources to meet the needs of your society?
Ms. Rampersad.
I love all the comments given so far. I will just add to that, the contribution must be meaningful and it must be for the greater good of all. But my colleagues have done a fantastic job thus far, so I'll just add that to ensure that it's meaningful.
Ms. De Gannes?
I echo Khaleem's sentiments that governance is managing a country's affairs, right? And you can manage a country's affairs, but not manage it well. So I think that's something we'll delve into later on.
Yeah, and that's certainly why I said governance, the good, the bad, and the ugly,
yes.
Because we have governance, we have good governance, and we have bad governance, and then we have in between. Dr. Mohammed, what does governance mean to you?
I think one of the things that we have to take into consideration, adding to everything that everyone else has said, when you think of governance, one of the critical aspects of governance is accountability. And with that accountability comes the necessity for ethical behavior. So there's no governance and there's no good governance without that proper mechanisms for accountability, transparency, responsibility, and that ethical behavior that we all require in the overall structure, in the mechanisms of managing, in this context, a state.
Now, this morning's discussion is centered around youth and governance. Are we all at the table? And we constantly hear this particular term, are we all at the table? And I mean, the last occasion when we held our first discussion here at the Office of the Parliament, we would have explored the issue of being at the table, and I know the fellow panelists at that particular time would have mentioned it. But what does being at the table really mean? And I mean, it's very subjective. What does it mean to you? Khaleem, when you hear, are we all at the table, what does that mean to you? Because we could say this is us being here at the table, but somebody may say this is tokenism. What does it mean to you?
Okay, so for me, being at the table means having the opportunity, having the space, and having the willingness or the acceptance by other persons at the table to be heard and to make a meaningful contribution. But emphasis being on the word meaning, not having a young person at the table simply to say we have youth inclusion or we have youth participation, but actually giving that person the opportunity to speak, amplifying their voice and integrating their contributions into the decision-making process.
Jásher, what does being at the table mean to you?
Simply inclusivity. Right? And we know a lot of times, especially in the political space, we have a lot of men at the forefront. But I must commend the Trinidad and Tobago because, of course, we just installed our second female president, right? We had a female president before that. So I think that being at the table means inclusivity of women. We can see that even in our House of Representatives, we have a female Speaker of the House, right? We have female members of Parliament, and not just women, but of course, young people, and forums like this, discussions like this open the opportunity for young people like myself to be at the table, to let our voices be heard. So again, being at the table means inclusivity, women and the young people being able to voice their opinion.
Ms. Rampersad, what does being at the table mean to you?
So being at the table means being allowed the opportunity to be included, but not just be included for tokenism purposes, but more so for effective, meaningful youth participation, not just to be included at the end of the process, but throughout the process of governance, youth for youth. You can't be making decisions for me without me being included. And that having a seat at the table also means that we have a say in our future.
Certainly. Chrisette?
So to echo the sentiments that all my colleagues said, I think being at the table is actually a human right. It's enshrined in the International Declaration of Human Rights. It's enshrined in the human rights of a child. Beyond it being a human right, how can you make decisions, especially in the context of Trinidad and Tobago? 40% of our population are between the ages of 10 to 35, yet still only 2.83% of our MPs are under the age of 30. So that leaves us the question, are we really at the table?
Dr. Charles, what does being at the table mean for you or to you? Dr. Charles, I think your mic is mute.
Several of what my colleagues indicated, I share, but considering a challenge that we have in the Caribbean, where I think it was Mr. Rampersad who talked about youth being there in a supervistic way, and what we sometimes call as youth watching, so to speak, to kind of give the event a youth face. But so what is important is young people, by participating, and they being allowed to impact the policy agenda, and they being allowed to impact the decision making, because at the end of the day, there must be a purpose, there must be a reason why the participation is happening, and therefore, so the participation, are we going to see policy? So, for instance, we have a major conversation going around the issue of economic policy and economic strategy, especially in a post-COVID-19 environment. How involved young people as a demographic group in terms of giving direction to the economic policy and the economic strategy going forward, considering what my other colleague just said here, that about 44% of the population are persons between 10 to 45. So I think that is what is critical. And the next side of it, I think also, is providing the support to young people to be able to organize and build structures and processes in their own spaces. So supporting things like national youth conference, youth-led organizations, so that they can have a voice that is independent of other types of influences in this country.
What does being at the table mean to you?
Well, my question back to you is which table? Which table are we talking about?
Well, we will get to that. So,
but to answer my own question, in the context of Trinidad and Tobago, we are operating in a bubble, and there is a huge vacuum as it pertains to the young people being at the table, because the table that I am referring to is the national table, and the national table that would address the issues that are affecting our young people and the national issues that are contributing to the low interest rate of young people in national issues and in the participation of national issues. That table is blocked, it is intercepted by another table, which is the political table. And that political table is not going to allow the national youth platform that we all want to belong to flourish and to go to a different level, because it's not just about tokenism, it's about sycophancy. And if we share a different view, which I believe we all do, in the national space to what the politicians different to what the politicians believe or are subscribing to, including the youth politicians that are in active politics, then we are automatically excluded from that table. And therein is the problem in itself.
Ms. Baker, what does being at the table mean to you?
Okay, so being at the table means to me, I like how what was mentioned before about being a part of the policy-making agenda. And so to include youth voices and young people at the stage where policy is already created is one thing. But to now involve them in the conversation when you're making a plan and an agenda for how you're going to utilize your budget, which programs you're going to prioritize, that is critical. And so just like in conversations like these, understanding and recognizing youth as a mandatory part of that, of developing a policy or discussing anything on a national forum, that is what being at the table means to me. And actually seeing more than just young people coming off at the tail end of something, but having them at the creation, the introduction, the drafting stage, where what is being drafted is now reflective of their ideals, reflective of their reality, and molding the future that they want for themselves.
And I hear all of you all, and I quickly took some notes while you were speaking and responding to the question, and I asked those two particular questions to get a sense of, and to base our discussion this morning on where you all are at in terms of this particular topic, get a feel of the topic. And so that's why I asked at the beginning, what does governance mean to you, and what does being at the table mean to you, and, really and truly bringing the both of them together. Now, we heard responses like being heard, inclusivity. Dr. Ahmed asked us, which table? Somebody else mentioned being allowed to impact policy and a whole lot of different things. And so it's important that we ground our discussion in these particular ideas as we delve forward. Now, when you look at this particular topic, what do you think about when you think about issues and stumbling blocks that prevents the youth from being at the table? Dr. Mohammed, I'd like to start, but I would like to restart with you and ask you, what do you think are some of the hindrances or the stumbling blocks that prevent youth from being at the table?
Political. Let's start there. If we are not politically aligned, or we don't share political philosophy or ideology, we're automatically excluded. That's one. And our politicians are not at the level of maturity where they can accept that there is a difference of an opinion, and that difference of opinion may actually be a progressive one, and it may be a transformational one, and may actually contribute to the transformation of the society and the empowerment of young people. So if we are living and operating in a society where our politicians don't align, or we don't align to the politicians' views and their ideologies, and we are automatically excluded, then we're simply like hamsters running on a wheel, and the system just continues to operate, but there's no progress. And at the level of governance at which we need to be at, we also have to take into consideration that Nobody's talking about constitutional reform. And everybody around this table has somehow added to the conversation the word inclusivity. And in the last couple of weeks, I was doing some peer reviews for some papers for the International Leadership Conference. And the acronym DEIB, Diversity, Equality, Inclusion, and Belonging, came up as a major concern for young people at the global level. It is not that Trinidad and Tobago is lacking in that. That DEIB, that Diversity, Equality, Inclusion, and Belonging, is very relevant to the Trinidad and Tobago space. The problem is we have politicians that are operating in our parliaments and who are controlling our political dialogue that don't understand it, and because they don't understand it, they automatically exclude it.
Ms. Rampersad.
I want to continue from your point in terms of the lack of opportunity when it comes to politics. Now, we can all agree that young people want to be part of the discussion. We want a seat at the table. But when we do see it, that the few young persons that are allowed to have a seat at the table are very more than often politically aligned. And so now the question comes, are we really properly represented as young people at the table? Or is it that these few persons that are put are just there solely for the purpose of being a placeholder to add to the topic of tokenism? And I feel like we lack representation there. And if you could look around, everybody's head is shaking. And those said persons become a dashboard puppy where they just said yes, because nobody wants to challenge the status quo. Everybody wants a safe seat, so everybody's just going to go along and just go with the flow. But I've yet to see some young individual that take a stance to truly represent us. So that is definitely something that we need to have a discussion about. So continuing with tokenism. Most of the times, you're just here to show that we have young people involved. Are we really meaningfully making any impact? Our voices truly being heard? And that is definitely something that we need to add, because Chrisette would have mentioned, the youth population is one of the largest. But if we are not being heard, then what are we really doing? We're not being represented, and it definitely is an infringement on our human rights. So there's another topic of age discrimination. We are told young people are too young, we are too reckless, we lack knowledge. If you are not willing to teach us and be very open with us or allow the space for us to grow without in some means grooming, and I know I have to be very cautious with that term, but if you are not allowing us to flourish on our own, how do you expect us to have the opportunity presented to us to grow in this space? And a conversation that most of us don't really like to have. And I can speak for myself on this. One of the things that make me not want to enter the political arena is the quality of leadership that we have and the quality of politicians within our country. It is very distasteful and disrespectful at times. I have been disrespected as a female by some male politicians that aren't even speaking to me directly. So as young people, are we really supposed to look up to these people as leaders? Are they truly leaving room for us to grow into and properly be molded into leaders? So that is another question on my end as well.
We will get to that, of course. Ms. Baker, what do you think are some of the hindrances or issues that prevent the youth from being at the table and being an integral part of governance? I know Dr. Mohammed mentioned which table, but we want to be part of the table that is able to impact policy, just as you all would have mentioned.
Right. So I know that what would have been mentioned earlier would be some of the areas that we would like to see improved. And so what I'd like to say is utilizing the tools that we have available now. So, for example, we have joint select committees, that's why I would bring that up. But it really is a question of young people, one, informing themselves of how to engage and hold, politicians accountable. That's step one, because to be at the table is one thing. To say something and have an opinion is one thing. But to actively to make a difference, you have to put yourself in a space that is going to impact that for yourself at times. And so young people have to make themselves knowledgeable about the ways in which you can hold your government to account. You can include your voice in discussions. You can submit questions to your MP, get it to, the parliament. All of these things. So it's more than just inviting all of us here to have a conversation. There's a personal responsibility aspect of it where you have to inform yourself and find the avenues where you can contribute your voice to impact your space. I think that's where it starts, and then we And then when the government begins to see the traction and the fact that young people are not willing to accept this as their future, accept this as their life, then by no choice, things are going to start to change automatically, because at every juncture, there's a group of young people or a collection of youth voices that dissent anything that is going to cause or impact their future negatively. So I think, for me, that's where it starts.
So essentially you're saying that more education is needed, and it's not just about actually being a representative to be able to impact upon the policy, but it's also informing and educating yourself on ways that you can, simply through Joint Select Committee, as I know you always champion, sending in your questions and that kind of thing. Chrisette, what do you think are some of the issues and stumbling blocks that prevent youth from being at the table?
For me, there are two direct stumbling blocks that prevent youth from being directly engaged in the decision-making process. One being ageism, and one clear example happened in Barbados, where the Prime Minister wanted to appoint an 18-year-old, yet they did not get the two-third majority vote because there were comments like he's too young. And I loved when she said that age doesn't define or determine one's intellectual capacity. So ageism, you would hear a person say it, you hear older person saying it in the community. So it's really calling for that transformation within our society that lead for that intergenerational dialogue to understand that you may have a different perspective, I have a different perspective, but we need to meet at the middle. And to youth political apathy. Parliament mirrors our society, and if you see the conduct that's happening inside, I often question why are we shocked when that's the behavior on the outside of politics as well. It happens in the youth space. And unapologetically, I would say some of the conducts that happen is what actually happens in Parliament as well. And you would come across young people who are more than capable of making decisions, drafting policy, but yet still they would say, I don't want to get involved in politics because they don't want to be a part of that lifestyle. So I would say those are the two major stumbling blocks.
I think that is also said, using what taken out from your statement when you mentioned that they don't want to get into politics because of the behavior that they see in Parliament, but also because of some of the very personal attacks that people often receive, especially youth, when they even speak for a political organization, even if they aren't integral or necessarily part of the discussion. Jásher, what do you think are some of the stumbling blocks that prevents youth from actually wanting to come to the table?
Let's be real, right? Previously, parents could have told a young person, you have to vote for this political party, otherwise you can't come into my house, or, stuff like that. Those were statements made long time. But in this generation, young people are becoming much more aware. Young people are making decisions on their own. And against that backdrop, because young people are making decisions on their own, right? Sometimes they don't want to fit into a political party, and they want to branch out on their own, perhaps run as an MP on their own, perhaps even run as a councillor on their own, but they don't have the resources to fund stuff like that. So I believe a lack of resources as well could hinder young people from even wanting to have a seat at the table. And let's also open a can of worms here. Right? The question was, what are some hindrances to young people being at the table? How are we so sure that there are young people who want to be at the table? Oftentimes when I discuss or have discussions about politics with young people, they are completely oblivious, sometimes even to the names of ministers in government, right? And it just shows that there is, well, I cannot speak for the whole of Trinidad and Tobago, but I could speak that there are a lot of young people who are not interested in governance or even having a seat at the table. And that could be because of various reasons that I hope that we could elaborate on in this discussion.
Dr. Charles, what are some of the hindrances that prevent young people from being at the table?
Well, I want to start from the last one that my colleague here was just raising. The question has to be asked whether the existing structures and processes are meaningful to young people. Are they achieving results that are related to the priorities and needs of young people? And that's the big question. There's also, I think, somebody raised the issue of the perception of youth. I've always said that in our society, to a large extent, the perception of youth that pervades the decision-making on all those areas is one of a deficit perspective, where young people are not seen as partners or persons who have a capacity to contribute. they are seen as perhaps a problem for the society to deal with and that. But there are two other areas I want to say. One, from the standpoint of the young people themselves, I think they need to be greater effort in they becoming better organized, strengthening the organizations, developing solidarity across various networks that they have. There are some youth networks that deal with gender-based violence, there are those that dealing with local, a whole range of them. I think there's need for greater solidarity so that you could strengthen the voice of the young people. But here is the elephant. A lot of the interventions we request may provide what I call incremental improvement. There is a conversation to be had about power, that concept, that notion of power in other societies. And I would posit the view that in our societies in the Caribbean, including Trinidad and Tobago, there is a very elite concept of power, that power should be owned by a small elite group, whether they are parliamentarians, whether they are not a small elite group. And therefore, that in itself is a major hindrance, because it does not, it creates a lot of barriers for a wider group. And also, young people who are on the cutting edge of change and wanting things done differently. So if we are going to, in a meaningful way, create an environment for young people to participate, then we have to look at the approach to power. We have to have a power relationships that are more distributed, that are more democratic, so to speak, and not the elitist approach to power that currently exists in our societies in the Caribbean.
Thank you, Dr. Charles. Khaleem, before I get to you, Dr. Mohammed did want to respond to something that Dr. Charles was saying, so I'll allow him, and before I come to
I actually wanted to just add that there's this, and I'm glad you raised the issue of ageism. It is something that irks me. And the comment that you are too young, or what do you know, or what does them young people know, has circled around me when I was politically active at one point in time. And I think that led to me becoming inactive and going down the route that I pursued, right? But there's also the other aspect that young people should not have an opinion. And when they do have an opinion, everybody's down their throat because you are not well researched. That this issue, and that is, I mean, I'm currently on a social media battle here because I placed my opinion for the first time on a particular issue. Around this table, we are all going to have different things that we are going to be championing personally. If you look at Trinidad and Tobago, I am saying that we are in desperate need of constitutional reform. And constitutional reform is the only thing, the only mechanism that we can see some level of transformation of the society and of the systems by which we operate.
As a first step.
From a first step, right? And that has to come from somebody rising up within the state and within the nation and within the political space and being charismatic enough for young people to gravitate towards. And believe it or not, come 2025, I think there are politicians that are sitting in the parliament knows that the most influential group of voters are going to be the youth voters.
Certainly.
They are going to tip the balance. But are they going to tip the balance? I keep saying to everybody that I speak to in terms of young people belong to a network. And young people, as you rightfully said before, parents used to say to you, if you don't vote for so-and-so, you can't come in my house. You can now tell mommy and daddy, well, if you don't vote for so-and-so, your pension will stay where it is, right? Your pension will stay where it is and there'll be no progress, right? So that we have that ability to influence those same persons who are traditional voters. The table that we are looking for, we have to create the table. The mechanisms to get to the table, we have to push the door. So when somebody look at you and say, well, you're not well researched, or they look at Khaleem and they say, Yeah, young budding lawyer. Everything everything that comes out of your mouth should be well researched. No, I don't need to be well researched. I am entitled to an opinion, and that opinion forms part of my belief system. And I am entitled to having a belief system as a young person in the looking around in the environment in which I belong. Take, for example, the issue of, we just had 2 days of talk shop in a Caribbean symposium on crime. And where was the young people involvement in that discussion? Absolutely absent, right? We had people, prime ministers talking about the issue of bail and all of those things. And there are people in Trinidad who stoop and who turn their nose because they can't. What about the issue of cause and effect? The issue of cause and effect also pertains to us coming to the table. What is the cause as to why we are not on the table, and the effect of that cause as to why we don't, as you rightfully say, want to be at the table. We want to be at the table, but not on their terms, on our terms, and we have to make it happen.
Well said, Dr. Mohammed. Khaleem, I want to bring you in now. I mean, you've been able to hear, you've heard all the things said by your fellow panelists. What do you think are some of the hindrances or the issues that prevent youth from being at the table?
Well, let me just start off by saying, I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. And I'm going to try to tie everything together in saying that for me, the biggest obstacle is treatment. And treatment has to be looked at in two regards. It has to be, as Dr. Charles mentioned, treatment from those who are in power and treatment of those who have to be empowered, right? And when you look at it in terms of those who are in power, my question is, why is it that the word youth only appears when the election bell has rung? Why is it young people are only valued, they're only talked about when there's an election coming up? And that point was mentioned, that we have the influence to tip the vote, right? Which politicians are very much aware of. But then you hold young people up as tokens, you use youth inclusion, youth participation, using youth engagement as buzzwords or popular culture terms without attaching any meaning or significance to them, right? And then you just look at young people or perceive young people to be vessels that you can fill with empty promises. And then when you look at the election has passed, where's the financial resources to back up the promises that were made? Where's the technical support? Because we have to understand it's not just about money, it's about wherewithal and know-how. And young people don't have that either. And there are no structures in place to actually give young people meaningful opportunities to participate. Because, as Terriann mentioned, yes, there are joint set committees, there are these avenues, but if you're not educating people about these avenues and these resources, then the question has to be asked, are you intentionally keeping young people in a place of ignorance? And when I look at people who have to be empowered, and I'll try to wrap this up quickly, then you also have to look at the responsibility on young people, because we also share some of the burden and we have to take responsibility when it comes to empowering ourselves, so looking for those opportunities to actually participate and engage meaningfully, but critically too focusing on empowering others. As young people, we often empower ourselves, but then do not empower others. And that's where it boils down to me. It's treatment from those in power and treatment from those who need to be empowered.
Ms. Rampersad, I do know that you want to get in, so let's hear your...
Khaleem raised a very interesting point that we really need to consider as well. Is it intentional that young people are not being offered a seat at the table? Because when you look around the world, young leaders are rising. And whether they want to accept it or not, we are coming. Now, young people are completely okay with having mature, well-established current leaders help us train and prepare for that seat. But are they willing to allow us to lead them? And so we need to have that conversation, because we see it all around the world. We see it in the business place, but for this sake, we're sticking at it in the political arena. Is it that they are afraid to give up that seat, to step down, to allow us to now rise and take over? And I mean, Khaleem, thanks so much for bringing up that point, because it completely flew over my mind. We are willing, for so long we have allowed them to take charge, leaders, help us. most of them act on ideologies of what they think young people want, what we should do. But the reality is they are so detached, they don't know what we're experiencing. I am pretty sure politicians, again, ideologies, they think they know what we're facing. Do you know how difficult it is for a young person to qualify for a mortgage or to get a house? Are there, no, to get a job? Listen, that's a conversation by itself, right? But we opening the can, and the question is like, what are we really doing? Go ahead.
I'm glad you all are bringing up such wonderful ideas. And even before Khaleem would have spoken, I literally wrote, "Is the system engendered to keep youth from being at the table?" And that's the question I want to throw out to you all. Do you all think that the system is engendered to keep people at the table? I know Dr. Mohammed would have mentioned constitutional reform as our first starting point, or one of the starting points, rather. Chrisette, do you think that that's the case?
Can you come back to it?
Sure, that's okay. You want to take it?
Okay.
All right.
I will. The question, and I like the fact that you all raised education. And I remember one prime minister said there were 3 prime ministers that focused on education. And one talked about education being in your book bags, the other one be saying that education needed to be available for everyone. Another politician talked about education being the window out of poverty, right? I don't understand why is there such missed opportunities and missed understanding by the Minister of Finance in his annual budgetary allocation? Why have we failed our young people in instituting a working, accessible system for GATE to be given across the board? And the government has not seen it as an investment and a sustainable investment into the generations that are to come. Because I am sorry, the current complement of politicians may expire by 2025. Some are sitting in there, but have already expired since 2020, right? Because there is no alignment of ideology and belief system between those 41 and the people out there and the young people out there. In a country like Trinidad and Tobago, should we really be withholding free access to education when we know that education is really and truly going to give so much young people the opportunity to come out of poverty? And if we are behaving and wanting to put our heads in the sand and behave that we don't have a sector of our society that is within a serious poverty line, then we've just missed the whole idea of good governance. And that is what we need to start thinking about. Why are we not seeing giving education just that? Just give the gift of education and the opportunity of education to the young people and let them be empowered. Just start from there. Let me backtrack from constitutional reform. Let's take it in the current context. Why are we not educating our youth effectively? Why are we still stressing our young people over SE? Why have we not sought to come together as a parliament and both sides sit down and come together on a new reform that actually takes away the stress from young children dealing with SE? Why have we sat down for 60 plus years and operated under the same educational system where at Form 3 you're doing 14 subjects, you're going through all your hormonal changes, you're acting out, and you have teachers saying, well, that group of students, them we can't deal with them because them is the worst thing out. But why? Look at this system in which we are operating. It is old as the people sitting in the parliament, and I'm being diplomatic.
Sure. Khaleem, you wanna jump in here?
Can you just repeat the question?
Sure. The question is, do you think that the system is created to keep youth from being at the table?
Well, the question really is, where is the table?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, The table of importance or the table of significance is in a locked boardroom that young people do not have access to, that young people do not have a seat at. And like Dr. Mohammed mentioned, you have 41 people making decisions, approximately 1.4 million people, but there's no meaningful engagement of that 1.4 million people. And I don't mean just youth, I mean every single person. And let's take it back to this symposium that you mentioned and Dr. Mohammed mentioned. We had a 2-day symposium on crime. Young people were grossly underrepresented, in my opinion.
In fact, we only had one representative.
Yes, we had one representative as far as I'm aware. Grossly misrepresented. Yet, what does the data show? Young people are the most susceptible, young men specifically, to engaging in crime.
Correct.
You're then having this conversation at this table that is in a locked room at the Hyatt Regency, which is a 4 to 5-star hotel away from the average man and woman and child. And so if you are not willing to move or transition that table from the boardroom to the community itself, you're not going to have any sort of meaningful change, because then you're going to continue making decisions from a place of power, from a place of detachment, and from a place of, I think this is what young people want, as opposed to let me hear and listen to what young people actually want.
A place of ignorance, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's very easy to justify it and just carte blanche say, you know, we care about young people because we going to do X, or we're going to focus on this. But can you say you really care about young people if you never cared about the contribution that they could have made in the first place to impact that conversation? And I think in its current form, that table is not accessible. That table is in a locked room. And very few young people, I don't even want to say are given the key, they're given the opportunity to pull the curtain a little bit and look into the room and see the table.
So, Jásher, what are your thoughts on this particular question? Do you think that the system is created to keep youth from being at the table?
Well, I must speak to Tobago, right? I say that Tobago has been a trailblazer in this regard, right? Because if we look at the 2021 Tobago House of Assembly elections in Tobago, the 2 chief secretary candidates on both sides of the parties, they were youth, young people, they were youth. So I believe that Tobago has been a trailblazer in that regard. Even when they had the next election, because of the deadlock, we saw a lot more young candidates coming up to the forefront, offering themselves up for governance, and to me that is a great thing. Even if Tobago, as a smaller island, can set the trend for Trinidad, I mean, we are open and welcome to that. So I must commend Tobago in that regard.
You want to jump in now, Chrisette? What do you think the system is created that way?
From my humble opinion, I don't think that the system is created that way, you know. It's just that they are gatekeepers. People who are keeping the gate closed, and it's up to us to shake that gate. And I think throughout history, especially at the University of the West Indies in the 1960s, there were young people who literally shaped the system, shaped and amplified their voice and said what they wanted. And I think it's up to us, and the onus is really and truly on us, to show those who are holding the gate closed that we are here to open it and be part of the discussion. So it's not the system, but rather those who are keeping it closed.
Anyone else has thoughts on this particular question?
I do know, and I am just I'm just so passionate, you know, and, you know, about everything that has been said so far. But I don't think that the system is rigged per se against us, you know. But what I do think is that, you see, a knowledgeable society and an empowered group of young people is a dangerous thing to a government, because it means that now we know what you are supposed to do and we know what you're not supposed to do. And if you have a society or a large group of young people that are able to hold any entity in power, that entity now has to ensure that what they do is above board. And so to empower society, if you want persons to vote for you, you want that reliance. You want them to be able to trust that your decision-making is in their best interest. And so there's this fanciful way of engagement that gives you a semblance of change or a semblance of engagement, and that I am going to take your opinion into consideration, when in truth and in fact, that is not always the case. And I mean, even if we go even further, even going with what Khaleem had mentioned in terms of empowering young people, if we begin to think, and when I say we, it starts with us, but if the government and those that are in authority begin to think about how their policies would enrich and improve the lives of young people, to cause an improved and productive society, to gift people and give people the tools for them to advance themselves, contribute to society, then we have a well-oiled engine at every sector. But then, how do you now justify or underscore your level of importance? How do you now get young people to buy into your ideology? So that is a significant challenge. And just really quickly, because, Samantha had mentioned, really quickly, but, Samantha had mentioned this entire issue with housing, and, housing is something that's very close to my heart. I talk about it pretty often. But, for example, when we look at the budget, right? So let's see where the taxable income was increased. So now if you're making a certain amount of money, you're not going to be taxed the way you were before, right? Okay, so that is one thing. People are glad for that, right? But has that now opened up an avenue and given you an opportunity to now pursue housing? Are you now able to engage these markets? Right. So again, a semblance of can be life-changing, but no actual grit or no actual evidence. And so therein lies the issue. How do you make your policy agenda in line with improving the lives of society and incorporating the voice of young people? Because if we are the working class, we need to be able to access all of these things that would make our lives better. Housing, vehicles, and you all know I can go on. But it is so important because young people want to feel as though the policies that they're speaking to are going to improve and impact their lives. And that is what, even in this discussion now, how do we do that?
Mr. Rampersad, I want to get you in, but I do want to get Dr. Charles in. So, Dr. Charles, do you think that the system that we live in is one that encourages the youth to be stay where they are and not get a seat at the table, essentially?
The thing, I would answer that question that way. I know there are two of our colleagues there who may be better qualified as lawyers. But there is, if you notice, a prevalence of courts ruling against the state on several critical issues, which is a recognition that the courts may be saying they recognize that there is an imbalance in power relationships, power of the state. And so, moving on from that, to say, I believe we've reached a stage, and not now, but we are certainly there now, that there should be the relationship between the state and the citizenry has to change. The nature of governance has to change. And I think Dr. Mohammed was saying the idea of that 30, 40, 41, 19, 17 people are assumed to be have this monopoly on what is best for development or best for the people. I think that is obsolete. That concept is obsolete. And therefore, we need to create these new opportunities, new spaces for participation, for people to be able to participate in their own process of governance. And why I put it at that level is because if we do not deal with that superstructure, and we focus just on young people participation, we may get now and then a little surasma, meaning we open up a little space for youth participation, but the superstructure remains one that is not very tolerant of engagement and participation. So at the same time we're promoting youth participation, we need to look at how those governance processes and structures and systems are limiting the ability of the citizenry to play a more engaged role in their own development and governance.
I agree with you. You all would like to add in?
I just want to add to the part where there's also the idea out there that why are you being so emotional? And I think we could all identify that, right? And I just got hit with that line just now. Why are you so emotional, right? And I've gotten that question many times, and it's people fail to realize that young people we're not emotional. we're passionate. And there's a difference, a huge difference that those people that is over the road downstairs there in that chamber don't understand. That it is different. The same way Commonwealth is all passionate about his financial, his budget, his fiscal package, and he's going to come with all excitement to present it. And the same way that Kamala Prasad is passionate about the law, right, and is going to turn her political party into a legal firm by itself. We young people are passionate also about what tomorrow holds, what 5 years from now looks like. Because as my friend rightfully talked about, the little pittance we got with regard to non-taxables, right, non-taxable salaries, did that allow us the opportunity to get housing? The answer is no. Did it give us the opportunity to get proper loans, to get and access loans, to get cars and all of those things? The answer is no, right? So if the small things that makes us our lives livable at a satisfactory level,
livable at a satisfactory level
is not within our grasp, then you know what I am afraid of today? That the people that are looking around and that we're talking about, they are all going to say, those six don't know what they're talking about.
But you know, the possibility is that's exactly what they're doing, because we're here having the conversation, but what we are saying here being taken into their consideration.
Both sides will line up their young people and say, well, look.
Well, I actually wanted to, because for the sake of time, I will take that. We can go on. Okay, all right. Chrisette raised a very pertinent point. It's not that this system is rigged, it is the gatekeepers that I believe are intentionally keeping the young people away from the table. And so now it comes to this. Is it that they want the youth population dependent on them? That is why they're not empowering us. Yeah. And so when you look at it from that perspective and you take into consideration, young people, name is thrown around during election times, they invite you to come and sit down and hear them talk. It's all tokenism to show, well, yeah, we included them, but are we truly being included? And the answer to that is no, we're not. Because it's been years. We all have been on panel discussions. We have all asked to be included. It's been years. I have been in the youth space for more than 7 years, and we have been asking for inclusion. And I have never once made a recommendation that I actually see something being done about it.
Yeah. Or you've seen it in black and white.
No, because we get empty promises. And you see, politicians think that we are okay with just words. Words are beautiful when it's been said, But unless we see something in policy, unless we see some action, we know you're taking us for granted. And trust me, young people are not stupid. We very much know that you're playing us for a fool. But it is time, how much times do we have to come here and sit up? I'm in Parliament for the second time asking you, include me now. We want to be heard, and then it comes back to when we get the little opening in the gates, like you all say, just to take a little peek at what's going on in the Golden Room. The peekers are the ones that are the dashboard puppies now. Yeah, so what are we, how can we say that young people are really represented? How could we, listen, I realize I just let go some firecrackers.
I think you just let go some fire, so a lot of fingers are up now. Who wants to, does she want to go?
I like how she asked, are young people voices being heard? Because we have the National Youth Parliament in Trinidad and Tobago, which is an excellent program. It really is. I am very happy that I was able to be a part of that. But is that really relevant to the ones in authority? Are they really taking what we are saying into consideration? Because we debate year after year, but do they sit and do they listen? Do they say, okay, after this youth parliament, we are going to draft a policy document or something based on what was said, and this is going to be something being debated at the actual parliament. So yes, we have the youth parliament. Yes, it's a space for youth, but are our voices really being heard through the youth parliament?
I like that you said that, because there are 4 youth parliamentarians that I know sitting here at the table, and even one of the organizers. But what I would say on that particular point of the youth parliament, and I think it's a matter of formalizing things and making things into policy. I know for a fact that in Grenada, the previous government who would have been voted out last year, they were actually on their way to putting forward a bill to be debated that would make their youth parliament a formal setting, so that it would go from that particular stage towards the actual parliament. because I inquired of my friend who's a senator there, and he mentioned to me that it's no longer in train, but I think it's a matter of formalizing things now. I like the fact that we've been able to hear all the hindrances and all the issues and stuff, but before I go into the solutions, I know Khaleem wants to come in, so I'll bring him in, and then we go on to some of the solutions.
Yes, I just wanted to say, and kind of echo Samantha and Jásher's comment about the people who make the decisions. Who has their ear, right? And when you look at that within the context of young people, it's often the people from within their own political party or within their own political space who've gotten to the place of having the ear by following the rules and the guidelines set by that political party. And you have to ask yourself, if that is what you're listening to, is the advice that you're taking independent advice, or is that advice that comes from a place of, I'm taught to think this way, or I'm taught to think this way, or look at problems this way. And, I'm not the kind of person who will come and say something like that and then say, we need to fix this and not propose a solution. The question has to be begged, why isn't there in Trinidad and Tobago, for example, a youth advisory council? And when I say a youth advisory council, I mean, okay, let me get out of the way and say flat off, the first thing that people are going to come and say is, oh, political. They're just going to appoint their own people to do it. Okay, 5 people from the government, 5 people from the opposition, 5 people from the independent bench. Everybody has the opportunity to contribute to that. You don't want it to be political, let somebody who's from the independent side be the chair. But at the end of the day, have that be your task force. Have that be the people to debate things that affect young people, so you can still get your political narrative in from both sides, but you still have an independent ear to it. And you have then that group of young people, what is it teaching them? It's teaching them, probably future politicians, how to work together, how to come to consensus and get away from this fighting system of governance that we have. And make recommendations then to the government, and when those recommendations go to the government, those are recommendations that are representative of young people of Trinidad and Tobago, not the UNC, not the PNM, not any political party, but it takes an approach that caters to the political narrative, but also ensures consensus building, some level of independence. Those are the types of things that we need to be talking about. Those are the types of actions that we need to see being taken. It can't just be, okay, you're going to now appoint a committee to look at this and evaluate this. But then when you look at who's on the committee, it's the same set of people. You cannot keep shuffling the same deck of cards and expect to play a different game.
Yeah. Certainly. And I like the fact that you all would have all mentioned the fact that it's not that the system is really crazy, but there are gatekeepers keeping us there. Dr. Charles, I would like to ask you, as one of the persons who would have been instrumental in giving your voice towards our national youth policy, how do you propose that we get rid of those gatekeepers to allow us as a youth to now have a seat at the table?
Well, there are two I look at the whole question of participation and engagement in 2 broad areas. There is what I call civic engagement, and that is we've been talking a lot about. And certainly there is need for reformation in terms of the existing structures, including gatekeepers with a different mindset, as you all are saying. So there is that. Trying to see how best the existing established processes more engaging and create opportunities for young people to participate. But do not underestimate the other aspect of it, which is what I call grassroots mobilization. Because one of the ways that you get to change a system that has become, well, non-functional or non-relevant or safe is by creating alternative systems. And so the idea of organization, the idea of young people developing their own democratic and independent organization, and working in solidarity, then creates that pressure, so to speak, on the established system to find ways to change, because they realize that they are not the only game in town. People have their own spaces and their own processes, and where they are making the voice heard, and it is not to be controlled by persons with vested interests. So there is the reformation, continue to to speak out, continue to recommend how they can change the existing processes so that it's more tolerant and allow for greater participation. But I want to say, especially in the Trinidad and Tobago landscape, the idea of building your organizations independent and where they are already in existence, strengthening them, the idea of solidarity, even if you are working in agriculture and you're doing in women's gender-based or this one in child rights, when you look at it on beneath, there is an underlying set of factors that are putting all of us at risk. And therefore, we need to build that solidarity so that the voice of young people will be powerful and we have to be heard and listened to in that situation.
Sure. I like to talk, I don't just like to talk about issues and challenges, but I like for us to also propose solutions. I mean, some of the solutions were mentioned as our discussion went along. So let's now look at our solutions. Khaleem, what are some of the solutions that you think that immediately can be implemented to allow you to have our space at the table and be able to have some say in the governance structure of Trinidad and Tobago?
Okay, so solution number one is the solution that has to come from the young people. And that's one, a change in your mindset and a recognition that you as a young person, your vote matters, your voice matters, and you have the opportunity to be an agent of change, whether or not you are in the halls of power or not. And a part of that solution for young people, and I would want to issue a call to all young people, is collaboration. If we make up 40% of the voting population, it's very easy to divide and conquer. Yeah. But if we can come together and we could say, this is not what we want for Trinidad and Tobago, and work together, build on our differences, build on our shared ideals, and push for what we want Trinidad and Tobago to look like, then perhaps we can make some change. I always say, youth today are not the future, we are the now. Because the decisions that are made today aren't going to impact us as much as they're going to impact our children and our children's children. So if we cannot hold the reins of power, we have to hold the people who hold the reins of power to account. You know, I would have mentioned the Youth Advisory Council, or something as simple as a long-standing youth parliament that is tasked with the responsibility of the debate, seeing Terry watching me, that is tasked with the responsibility of looking at issues that affect and impact young people. And perhaps, you could look bigger. Maybe if you don't want it to be national, it could be something that CARICOM does. If there are so many issues that impact young people and the issues are the same across the region, why isn't there a CARICOM Youth Parliament or a CARICOM task force that is set up to debate issues that relate to young people, but issues that are debated by young people on a continuous basis to address the issues that affect CARICOM, that affect local states? And if then those recommendations could be sent to the CARICOM heads of government, then they have something from the young people. But there's also a paper trail. There's a document that says, these are the issues that affect us. This is how we view it. These are our solutions. The job is now yours to do something about it.
Ms. Rampersad.
I mean, I could tell you a bunch of solutions. I could talk about having youth quotas. I could talk about education. I could talk about peer-to-peer mentorship. But my main solution that I would put forward here is that the onus is on us as young people. Young people need to educate themselves on their role in society and the power that they hold. And you need to start acting with that power that we hold. We need to stop allowing other people to make decisions for us and keep whispering behind a door that doesn't respond back that we want to be heard, because nobody is hearing you. So as long as we are able to empower ourselves, as long as we are able to come together and stand in solidarity independently and with meaningful, truthful, and impactful, ideas and all these young innovation and creativity that we want, as long as we can come forward with that. And by no means am I inciting a coup. I just want to put that out there because I had this conversation in class at a time. But young people, truly, we hold the power. We all hold the power. And if we could just realize the power we have and we start acting, listen, all of these debates and these conversations would be so unnecessary. But we lack the knowledge of understanding the power that we hold within society.
Ms. Benjamin.
So thank you for the question. Now, this is very complex, but I think we could start with acknowledging that being at the table, we have to understand that the message is always better from the source. So we need that representation in the parliament, because no person that's not young, that doesn't fall within the age group, would be able to say, yes, this is why we need youth to be involved and be able to convince the rest of persons to understand. We need one person to rise up to the occasion and be that voice and be that champion for us. And two, throughout globally, especially in the African region, you see there's a lot of youth parliamentary caucuses, and these caucuses have proven to be actually fruitful, where they put forward research, they do consultation with youth, and they draft proposals, they draft policy briefs that is actually considered in the parliament. So if we can get our national youth parliament to make that transition into probably a parliamentary caucus by youth or on youth issues, this is a nice step that we can take to actually get the youth agenda, because we need to be the co-authors of our developmental agenda, not just hear the story after it's drafted. We really need to be the co-authors.
Dr. Mohammed, I'd like to hear from you now. We are almost wrapping up, so we're trying to be concise. It's about 30 seconds.
I think you all have made extremely good points. And if we want, we have to look at what do we want in the immediate and in the near future. And we are in 2023. And if we really want to make that change, all of you have said it, that there needs to be a collaboration of young people coming together and a coming together of minds that can, for the lack of a better word, Samantha, you throw the word coup in my head and, remove, I will say, right? Remove the current status quo and give ourselves the opportunity to move in a society that's transformational. And if we have the same vigor and excitement and passion about becoming a TikTok star, then we can more than put that energy into being a patriot and a nationalist and be a star for yourself and your future, rather than just a 5-minute star that may last 5 days. I think our young people need to get serious as to what we want. The litmus test, and I always say it because Tobago is my love, and I've studied the Tobago politics for the last couple of years. I've been in the Tobago space. I have respect for what Tobago has done, and I have respect for the fact that everybody, and I saw it with my own eyes, I predicted that outcome. I saw everybody in Tobago come together behind one group of people that shared a vision with the regular Tobagonian, from Charlottesville to Castara to Scarborough to Crown Point, that Tobago needed change. Trinidad and Tobago needs that change, and that change has to happen in 2025. Why? Because if it does not happen, as you rightfully say, now, then our future is in shambles.
Right.
That's where I want to leave it.
Ms. Gant.
I'll be very brief.
Sure, that's fine.
And I will say that education and empowerment are two very important things, right? And I just want to leave this bit of advice to the young people listening. Do not try to be a yes man or a yes woman just to have a seat at the table, because it would cost you a lot, your integrity. Over to you.
Terry?
Yes. Okay, so I wrote mine down in bullet points, but essentially, just very quickly, it starts with a mindset, and even in our spaces here, understanding that young people have innovative minds, and the way that a young person is able to, change a process from something that might be long-winded and tedious to something that's quick and effective. It all starts with recognizing that contribution, changing your mindset. But those that are before us are accustomed to a certain type of behavior or environment. So change is new to all of us. And so that is where I see the pushback happening. In terms of the advisory board that you spoke to, Khaleem, I mentioned this the last time, but the ministry had put out a bill and they wanted comments to actually establish a youth advisory board of sorts, right? And Samantha also spoke to youth quotas. Now, that is so critical. Now, I mean, if we want to go as far as constitutional reform, which can speak to so many things, but, you know, political parties understanding, even if it's in an informal way, understanding that their lineup of persons should include a certain percentage of young people because you recognize that that voice must contribute to lawmaking, to policy discussions, to amendments. And lastly, I think to really have true change is to educate. And, you know, Dr. Mohammed would have spoken to that too. And, you know, there must be some sort of discussion about changing the curriculum. You know, when we discuss social studies and we hear about who the prime minister is, who the president is, there's an aspect of youth development that is missing. How you can now involve yourself in the process. And now you're learning that at school. And now it becomes ingrained, you know, throughout your school life and understanding that you can make an impact, from that early. So I think it has to do with, you know, revamping the curriculum as well and ensuring that young people know the avenues that they can impact and also making that a natural part of their education. Because we, as you said, as a human right and even just existing in a society, you have to be able to contribute and effectively.
Sure. Dr. Childs, to you now, your views on your thoughts on solutions that we can do, very, very practical solutions.
Well, I think what I've heard so far is very encouraging. And our last colleague here kind of was touching on some aspects of this thing. I think we need to invest some time and energy. When I say we, I'm talking about the youth network, youth leaders, young people. The point I think Shane talked about, people pulling together, collaborating. You need to invest some time and energy in changing some of those mindsets, not mindsets of youth I'm talking about specifically. Remember, I started by saying that there is a prevailing perception of youth and young people. Two things. One, when they say youth, they believe it's one size fits all. I don't think people might say it, but I don't think there is an understanding that quite apart from what I call the chronological definition, the statistical definition of youth, that you have to be looking at the diversity of youth and the priorities that needs to be different. But the other one is this deficit perspective of young people as problems to be fixed, as a danger onto the society, a threat to the society, and perhaps explains why young people do not get a front seat in a significant way as the recent symposium and that. So we need to contribute to them because a lot of the people that we would want them to change and to say, okay, let us bring the young people in, let us get them on board. They are obsessed with and preoccupied with that mindset. Oh God, they could bring this young people on board, they go mash up the thing, boy. You know, they know what they're talking about and that kind of thing. So we have to invest in defeating, so to speak, that deficit perspective of young people. And part of it is the point that the last column before me made, is finding a way to put that message to the people out there, to try to identify the contribution that young people and the youth movement has made to the development, the evolution of the Trinidad and Tobago society, and to put it out there. Every significant change in the society in Trinidad and Tobago and other parts of the Caribbean, if you go back and you examine it, was led by young people. Every significant one, even the major upheavals of the 1970s, which has been celebrated soon by historians in terms of the Black Power revolution and some of those developments. The young people led those processes, right? And so, but what has happened, oftentimes young people do not benefit proportionate to the investment that they have made in those transformational processes. And so you have to put the message out there as well. that we are just coming to give joke. We are making a contribution. We have made a contribution, and this is the contribution that we are making, and this is how we can transform the society as young people. One round. Thank you
very much, Dr. Charles. We are basically out of time, but I just want to get closing remarks very quickly. Khaleem, let's start with you.
Young people have to be the change, but also have to be seen as the change.
Ms. Rampersad.
No, I said everything I have to say. I just hope that we could see some action coming out from this.
Chrisette.
I think my message would be, as soon as you get the opportunity to lead, don't shy away and don't think that you aren't deserving or you're not brilliant enough. You are. Put yourself forward.
Sure. Dr. Mohammed.
Don't let anybody tell you that you're too emotional or too passionate. And the 2025 is the litmus test for where we really want to be when it comes to being at the table.
Mr. Gant.
You don't have to have a position to lead. You can start right now.
And Ms. Baker.
And I would say educate yourself on the ways that you can make a true impact and not just have conversations that may lead to no active change.
Dr. Charles, very quickly, any words of advice to the youth and those watching?
Well, I think there are some structures in place. I think if you take some time and read the National Youth Policy, you will see the National Youth Policy of Trinidad and Tobago has provided a framework for young people to go forward. It sticks to the issues of housing and some of the things that we raise there. But I think the message I want to send is wherever you are, whichever community, whichever parish, whichever hamlet, organize yourself. Get yourself involved, whether it's in your professional association, your community-based organizations, your religious-based organizations. Organize yourself and minimize the differences. Try to find a common agenda around which you can collaborate and build solidarity as young people.
Sure. Thank you so very much, Dr. Charles. Well, this has been a discussion here at the Office of the Parliament on youth and governance. Are we all at the table? And this morning's discussion centered around the youth governance and really and truly making and creating a space for us at this particular table. Now, we heard things like collaboration, the Youth Advisory Council. We heard that the time for us to start is now. We heard that a Youth Parliament caucus should even be instituted. And someone simply said change. And I think a common thread that we would have heard emanating from among all of us here was education and empowerment. And so I think that's the way going forward, yeah? Right. So, well, this has been a discussion here at the Office of the Parliament on youth and governance. I would like to thank you for joining us on today's program.